Jesus is questioned by the Pharisees.
Is he riding on his donkey?
Nope, he did that already.
Oh, so when it comes back all the other days, he doesn't go through the eastern gate, or he does?
There's no indication of which particular gate he came in after that. He just goes into Jerusalem. But on that particular day, yes, he went through the eastern gate. Yes, that's right. The second part, so this you might say is in the morning and afternoon. By mid-evening or late afternoon, that's how close we know when this happens, he gives his last sermon. This is known as the Olivet Discourse. Why? Because he gave it on the Mount of Olives. So he goes into Jerusalem, he's questioned by the Pharisees, he leaves and goes to the Mount of Olives and gives his last sermon before he goes back to Bethany. What is his last sermon? Okay, so what we're talking about here is Matthew 21, 23, all the way through 24:51. Also Mark 11, 27 through 13:37. Chapter 13, verse 37. This is Luke 20, verse 1 through 21, verse 36. So basically 2 full chapters for one day per gospel. 2 full chapters. Matthew and Mark, it's 3 chapters. So you see, one day, 3 full chapters in a gospel. Do you see that? On one day, we know 3 chapters in one gospel. Mark's gospel is only 15 chapters long, 16 chapters long. 3 out of 16 for one day, that's a significant percentage of the whole gospel. Do you see what I mean? The Gospels are all focused on these last 7 days of Jesus' life. We know what happened literally day by day. And in this case, what happened in the morning, what happened in the evening. That's how specific. So what happens in this day? Well, Jesus is questioned by the Pharisees. And really, this is the last time Jesus tangles with the Pharisees. So this is during the time. Now, there's a lot of things that happen, so I'm just going to be brief. So in the beginning, he's questioned. So this is where we get the story of, okay, Jesus, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And they think, we got him. Because if he says yes, then what he's saying is, oh, you affirm the occupation. You're in favor of these pagans in our country. How can you be so unpatriotic? You're not a real Jew. We've got you. Right? But what if he says no? Oh, no, don't pay taxes to see. Oh, you're a political subversive. You think we shouldn't pay taxes. You think we should overthrow the government. So you're against the Roman government. The Romans will get him now. We've got Jesus. He can't escape, can he? We've got him trapped. Honey, you can't trap God with human logic. Let me just put that to bed right now. If you think you're going to trick God by using human logic, you're barking up the wrong tree. What does Jesus say? Give me a coin. Whose image is on this coin?
Caesar.
You give to Caesar. What is Caesar? And you give to God. What is God? What does God own?
Everything.
Everything. So if it's got, you see Caesar on it, you give it to him. Give it to him. What has God's image imprinted on it? Us. Don't we have the image of God imprinted on us? Just like Caesar put his image on this coin? Then you give this to Caesar, but you give this to God. You got it? Shut up. That's not in the Gospels, that's Chip's version. But if I were Jesus, I would have said, shut up. But, see, I'm not. What else do we hit during this time? The Sadducees come to Jesus. Rabbi! Oh, and I can just see them coming on. Rabbi! Sweetie! And I'm going to go, oh Lord, now what? You think they get, I mean, it's almost comical when you read these encounters. It's like, we're going to trap him. I mean, they just really end up looking foolish. It's really kind of comedic when you, it's funny. It's funny. I mean, I laugh. It's like, oh, look, here they come again, this band of teachers. We've got it. They come to him and they say, Rabbi, by what authority do you teach here? And Jesus said, I'll answer that if you answer me this. John the Baptist's baptism, was it from God or was it from men? And then it says they huddled. And you just got to love the scene. All right, boys. All right. We got this. Okay. Now, if we say it's from God, he's going to say, well, then why didn't you believe in him? But if we say it's from men, they feared the crowd because they viewed John as a prophet. So they said, oh, gosh, we don't have an answer for this. Break.
We do not know.
So they turn to Jesus. We don't know where John got his message. Well, then neither will I tell you where I get my authority. See, you just got to laugh at these situations. It's like they're going to trap Jesus. Really? You're going to trap Jesus with these silly questions. They're trying.
Hard.
Yeah. I mean, they came up with some dillies. I would have been stumped with, should we pay taxes?
It's not unusual. It's happening these days. It's not unusual.
No.
We see it on TV all the time.
These kinds of traps and so forth, it seems like you're painted into a corner, you can't get out. And Jesus has the wisdom to just say, well, here you are. So they're humorous to watch because what it does is it destroys human logic. You can't trap God with these conundrums because he just walks right through them. And you end up looking foolish. Okay? So those are some of the examples of what happens. Now, what's the last sermon of Jesus? This is where Jesus predicts the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. Very, very powerful message that Jesus gives you. Very ominous message, quite honestly. Because he said, this generation shall not pass away until it see all fulfilled. A generation is 40 years. Jesus gave this sermon 30 AD. 40 years later, the Romans came in, 70 AD, destroyed Jerusalem, leveled the temple, and it has not been rebuilt since. Jesus' words came exactly true. I would argue to the very day that he did this, because they sacked Jerusalem during Passover, and Jesus did this during Passover week. It was the same season, and all of Jerusalem was packed full of pilgrims, and they were all horribly slaughtered by the Romans. Estimates are between 500,000 to 1.5 million Jews died in the sacking of Jerusalem in 70 AD. A very, very tribulation period for the Jews. And Jesus warned them in Matthew 24, so great is that tribulation that none has experienced it before, and none shall since. It was a horrible slaughter. The Romans came in mercilessly. The way that the historians described it, the Sea of Galilee was red with the bodies and blood of the Jews. They ran out of wood trying to crucify them out of the city along the roads. It was a horrible death. The only people that did not suffer were the early Christians. You know why? They remembered Jesus' sermon, and he told them signs to look for. And when they saw the signs, all of the Christians left Jerusalem, and none were destroyed. Jesus told them, and they listened, and they obeyed, and they were saved. The Jews did not, and were terribly destroyed during that slaughter. Okay? So that was Jesus' last sermon. Wednesday of Holy Week. This is Matthew 26, 14 through 16, Mark 14, 10, and 11, Luke 22, verses 3 through 6. Notice it's very little verses in comparison to like Tuesday, which had a couple of chapters each. This is traditionally the day that Judas agrees to betray Jesus. Judas goes to the scribes and the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, and strikes a bargain with them. I will deliver Jesus to you. And he is sold for how much? 30 pieces of silver, which is the price of a slave.
Joseph?
Slave.
Yeah.
The price of a slave in first century Rome was 30 pieces of silver. Jesus was sold as a slave to the Sanhedrin.
To the what?
Sanhedrin, the Jewish leaders. The Sanhedrin was the name of the group of Pharisees, the elders, the synagogue leaders and rulers they were the priests of the city. It was the council of priests that met and ruled the temple business. And so he agreed to sell them for the price of a slave. Who else was sold as a slave by his brothers? Joseph. So this is a repeat of Joseph. He's recapitulating the story of Joseph here. That's what's happening here. Just as Joseph's brothers sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites, Jesus is sold as a slave to the Sanhedrin for the same price. Same price. 30 pieces of silver. And that's basically all there is to Wednesday. Once upon a time, before Vatican II, when every day of the year the church mandated that you eat fish on Fridays. You remember those days where every Friday of the year, not just Lent, you were commanded by the church to eat fish as a form of abstinence in honor of Jesus' death day. Well, when it came to Lent, Wednesdays were also a day in which you were commanded, if you will, to eat fish on that day. in commemoration of this event where Judas agrees to betray Jesus.
Were you commanded to eat fish or just not to eat meat?
Not to eat meat. It was like having Friday on Wednesdays.
You didn't have to eat fish.
No, you didn't have to eat fish. Yeah. Right. You were commanded to abstain from meat on Wednesdays, like you would on Fridays during Lent. Okay. I remember a few Lents ago, I actually did this. That was my penance, my practice for Lent is that I did it the old way, and I remembered on every Wednesday of Lent that this is when Judas betrayed Jesus. Okay. So that's what happened on Wednesday. All right. We're nearing the end. Thursday. This is the beginning of the Triduum. What does Triduum mean?
3 days.
3
holy days.
3 days is what it means. It's Latin. Tri, like a triangle or a tricycle, has 3 wheels. Duum is day, means 3 days. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday are considered the 3 days of the Triduum. Before what? Easter. These are the 3 holiest of holy days of Holy Week. Okay? Why? On this day, Jesus establishes the Eucharist. He establishes, bless you, the priesthood, and inaugurates the new covenant. He does all of this on this day. How do you know he inaugurates the new covenant? What does he say? This is the cup of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, to be shed for you and for all for the forgiveness of